am the Terrific Lady, otherwise known as Brandy, and I run Retro Rewind, where we basically talk about all sorts of cool, like retro horror movies. And I'm very excited to have this guest. It's been like kind of like an on and off. We've been trying to like schedule some for like the last couple of weeks, but now I finally got him. I snared him. And I am talking with Vincent DiSanti, the founder of Womp Stomp Films. So welcome, Vincent.
Thanks for having me, Brandy. It's good to be here, and thanks for being patient while I kind of fiddle with my schedule around Never Hike Alone 2 and traveling across the country.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's just like I am a very patient person. So it's just like I am definitely willing to wait to, I was definitely willing to wait to interview. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate your patience. It means a lot.
Yeah. And so I guess we're just going to go ahead and get started and talking about all sorts of cool like horror things and stuff like projects that Womp Stomp Films is doing. So, but first of all, I'm a newcomer to all the awesome stuff that Womp Stomp Films does.
Well, we're welcome to have you.
Yeah. Yes, I wrote an article, a little bit of backstory for everyone. I wrote an article for Collider about Dylan's New Nightmare, and I was just like, what, this looks great. This is like, I've never heard of these people before. Like, and so then I go to the website, start watching all the stuff. It's like, oh my gosh, this is great. Like, but aside, I absolutely adore all the work that you guys do.
I appreciate it, and it's a big team effort. We there's a lot of people involved, and with the Dylan's New Nightmare project specifically, like that's not even my core team of people. That's people that I've met during my time making films and working in the film industry, and friends that have collaborated on Never Hike Alone projects. And with Dylan's New Nightmare, that's Cecil Laird over at the Horror Show, and he's based out of Phoenix, and I have friends up in Oregon who are based out of Portland and stuff like that. So it's really a cool collection of people really from all over the world. We have artists that contribute from several different countries. We have artists that contribute from all over the country and all over the world. So it's a pretty cool little collective of really like film nerds who love making movies about horror films, whether it be fan films or original work. It's just a really cool collaborative group, and we're really sort of proud of our ability to come together and create quality content.
Yeah, and whenever I was first started watching stuff that Womp Stomp Films did, I was like, this is, like I said, this is just like great. It's like I felt like I was watching, like sitting in a theater and just watching something just like up on screen. It's just like blew me away. Absolutely blew me away.
Well, thank you, and that's sort of the goal. It's independent cinema usually leaves filmmakers with very little to work with. So we're trying to take the resources that we can do on a budget, or that we can afford on a budget, and bring that to a level that makes you think that we have a little bit more money than we actually do. And it's just been a lot of practice, and luckily, it's been working.
I would say that it definitely has been working for you all, and like the end products, like they definitely show it. So talk a little bit more, I guess, too, about Womp Stomp Films. Like tell everybody a little about what you do, and basically for any like newcomers. So like, what does Womp Stomp Films do, and what exactly are fan films?
Okay. I'll start at the top. Womp Stomp Films is a small independent production company that was created in 2016 by myself and a group of friends. Started an LLC so we could, basically keep track of all the money that we were putting into the movies, and hoping to, create some independent content that would be something we could bring to film festivals and other projects like that. Our first project was the Never Hike Alone project, which was a fan film. And it was brought together by about 5 or 6 people that got together every weekend for a year and a half and went out and shot pieces of this movie, driving up to the mountain and capturing a scene for the week and coming back down and editing and looking at the mistakes and going back up and fixing it, and sort of taking our time to sort of do it right. And figure out the fan film world. We didn't know sort of what the rules were when we first got into it, but really before we got started, I did the research. The first thing that I had found out that is in 1976, there was something called the Fair Use Rights Act, and that allows people to sort of take known properties that are known in popular culture and parodied them. And as long as they're not making any funding off of that, they're not getting any profit, they're not selling it or getting distribution or making their own film series and sort of running off with it, that they would avoid being sued mostly by the entities that own those productions. There are other rules that kind of came along the way. Basically, to sum it up, is that if a franchise entity, say Friday the 13th, for example, if Sean Cunningham or Victor Miller or the people at Horror Inc. or Warner Brothers or Paramount or whoever sort of has a piece of the puzzle ever feels like a property is getting out of line, they can give us a cease and desist just because they can. The filmmakers who are tied to the original project can't have that ability to do that if they ever feel so need to do so. There was a fan film called Charles, which was based on the Child's Play series, that was hit with a cease and desist. There was even there's something called Jason Rises, which was a graphic novel in Friday the 13th that was hit with a cease and desist because it hit a certain sort of touchstone with the rights holders that they didn't want something in print sold outright. Making your film available for free is something that really sort of is our workaround for making fan films, is the fact that we can put them on YouTube. Anyone can watch them. They don't have to pay a fee. The fee all comes from us and the crowdfunding that we do, which is a group of collective fans who get together and, decide to pool their money and trust it with an entity like us, like Womp Stomp Films, to go ahead and produce the films. Coming back to Womp Stomp Films, we're a production company that knows how to put together small independent productions. We build a pre-production phase, we have a production phase, we have a post-production phase. We even have a home video phase. Doing the Never Hike Alone films actually taught us how to make our own Blu-rays and work with, manufacturing companies to get them put in physical media because fans wanted to keep it for themselves on their, shelves at home. As you know, horror fans love collecting stuff. So Never Hike Alone became a collectible. We run them in small batches, basically by prepaying for a Blu-ray in the Never Hike Alone campaign. That would secure you a Blu-ray that you would eventually get when the film was completed. And the film's going to come out for free online on YouTube first. And then a few months after that, when we've had time to put the disc together, a Blu-ray lands in your mailbox. There are exclusive content on there that, we do put on the YouTube eventually, but we let the people who back the film sort of enjoy their disc a little bit before we start throwing up all the content online and sort of not giving them anything new. But ultimately, it just sort of becomes this really fun hobby that allows me as a fan to connect with other fans, and they get to have that on their shelves and celebrate in fandom, and the fact that we chose to tell this story about Jason Voorhees with Never Hike Alone that touched a lot of people in the Friday the 13th and horror world and just cinema in general. I mean, a lot of Never Hike Alone fans weren't Friday the 13th fans before they watched our film, and we sort of introduced them to the series, or they were young kids that were on YouTube that discovered it. And because it's pretty YouTube friendly and it is pretty child friendly, aside from some language and some flash of violence and stuff like that, on the most part, from what they watch today, it's pretty tame.
Yeah.
And so, for us, it's this, our opportunities, independent filmmakers. Whereas in, my regular day job in life is I work on film productions. I did about 8 years in feature animation. I've done another 8 years in live action production, working on sets, working on TV sets like for The Rookie, ABC. I worked for American Horror Stories, for FX, and just a series of other commercials and TV shows and stuff like that. So I do have experience on, actual film productions, feature films, TV shows. And that's how I make my living. And Womp Stomp Films is this entity that allows me to, without an LLC or an entity or some type of sole proprietorship, you can't purchase insurance to do actual productions. You can't purchase permits. You can't pay people through SAGs and payroll companies. So we run on Womp Stomp Films as our arm in order to do these things. So when we order things from, our vendors at New Century Media to get Blu-rays and things like that, we're working at it through a business. So I'm not, personally, wiped out clean if something were to ever unfortunately go wrong. And so far, we've avoided all that trouble, avoided all those lawsuits, and have used sort of the success that we gained off of Never Hike Alone and people giving fan films a little bit more credit than they had before, and using that opportunity to help other filmmakers who want to achieve the same goal. They have a dream either about Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street or Halloween and Michael Myers. And we sort of have been a good guide for them, sort of a consultant. And, I don't take any cash. I usually just try to get to set somehow. If they can get me to set and I can be there, I'm just, a fly on the wall, and I'm there to help them when they have questions about crowdfunding, or if they need help getting connected with some certain person to get, a certain department covered. I just sort of like helping people fill gaps and bringing people together. And through that, we went from those 5 people going up into the mountain to make this movie to over 100 collaborators from around the world who now get together and make these productions, original and fan film related, come true.
And that sounds like awesome. This sounds like there's like a lot of moving parts like behind Womp Stomp Films. Like I wouldn't have expected like to be like that, also like that many
It is
people.
a lot of
Like
spinning plates.
so it's
It's a
like
lot of plate spinning.
so you feel like one of those guys like on TV go
Yes, it's very much like that. Cat wrangling is another metaphor that goes well with it. But like I said, it's a great team and everyone's self-sufficient. And for the people that do the different shows, like I worked on another film called Jason Rising, helped out with another film called Happy Halloween. So these are people that are doing their own projects, and I'm just sort of there as a backdrop of it. And they do it themselves. So not having to manage everything and giving everybody the autonomy to do their own projects has been very fulfilling from the standpoint of being a producer. So, I direct a lot of the content that Womp Stomp Films made. This is my creative outlet, but I have a pretty good logistic system too. And I do produce my own films along with my team, Brittany Montero and Kyle Klein and Kara Michelotti. So that with that team, we really sort of divide and conquer each of the tasks to make our films. But then I can teach other people who maybe haven't been through the process with SAG before. Maybe they haven't gone through the process of shipping a bunch of materials to people around the world before. And there's a lot of ways to do it. Some of them are more expensive, and we've researched the ways that it's the least expensive, that you're going to save the most of money, it's going to be the most efficient, and things are going to get there in one piece. And the damage is going to be minimized. So at the end of the day, these fan filmmakers that get into this racket of making these films or even crowdfunding a film, they try not to fall into a gap where they're not falling into massive debt to get their films finished, that they can budget accordingly, they can spend smart, and they can know that they're not overreaching for what they are, raising their money for and trying to do their film, and actually having a say, like, this is what you can actually afford. So with what you can afford, what can you actually accomplish that reaches a level of standard that's going to make people, want to watch your film. you know so we really talk, we talk strategy, we do all that stuff, and a lot of it's just because we love making films and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Speaking of films, I'm going to kind of sidle into Never Hike Alone, like the first one. Is what made
Okay.
Womp Stomp Films decide like we're going to start with a Friday the 13th Jason Voorhees like kind of film?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't really a big sort of epiphany where we were going to make this big feature film. It was originally going to be a 5-minute short, very akin to um, the opening act of Never Hike in the Snow. In fact, Never Hike in the Snow is an excerpt from the original version of Never Hike Alone. And it was supposed to be just a guy goes into the woods, he runs into Jason, runs back out, gets caught, gets killed, gets dragged back into the woods, Never Hike Alone, simple tale. We were creating a trailer for that in May, in the early 2016, and we released it in May 2016. And we sort of had that premise as the idea, and we were growing the idea a little bit more. It was probably going to, like I said, 5 to 7 minutes. It wasn't going to be too crazy. But while we were researching that, while we were doing that trailer, we were shooting it in Big Bear. We were tipped off to an abandoned camp that was down the road. The people who we were filming with were like, "Why are you filming here? Why don't you go to that camp that's down the road?" And we said, "We don't have the money for a camp." And they said, "No, it's abandoned. You can just go there and film. There's a path, and here's where it's at, and you should definitely check it out." And so we hadn't like really started shooting the film yet. We just shot sort of teaser images to sell the idea. And so eventually we took up these people up on their hint, and we found this, this lost trail that's kind of out in the middle of the woods, and we followed it, and we found an abandoned camp. And it wasn't just one building, it was, over a dozen buildings that we could use and manipulate and, take pieces from and put in different orders and kind of build the rooms around. And it started to become this thing of less of, oh, it's a guy who walks into Camp Crystal Lake, bumps into Jason, and runs away. He can go into the buildings now. He can really look around. And so while we were looking around this camp and sort of letting it fill in, a lot of the sort of first third and middle part of Never Hike Alone was where it was born. It just like, I wanted to give the audience the sense that I had walking around this camp and just feeling the atmosphere of it, and also taking them on a trip down memory lane of like, this is a place that actually existed. Let's pretend like this is a real place in history, and this is how it exists in a real history of people who aren't living in a film, but living in the real world. And let's slowly peel back the layers of the real world so that by the time we get to the Friday the 13th content, you feel like you've naturally transitioned into a world that didn't feel like hokey or arch or over the top, that like it felt like you could experience this as well. Um, we obviously had to figure out a formula for how to tell this story. I'm not a big fan of found footage, admittedly. I don't rush to see found footage movies, and I just don't typically enjoy them that often. But I did see a film called 127 Hours by Danny Boyle,
Yeah.
and then The Martian came out, and those were two films that took that the style of a character that's left alone, that has a camera and talks to it sometimes and engages with the audience, but then puts that camera down and goes back into what we consider a real movie type setting where we're looking at third person narrative and we're seeing him try things. And I liked that formula. And I thought that, if I took the concept of like with James Franco and The Boulder, or Matt Damon and being stuck on Mars, it was Kyle MacLeod and being stuck in the forest with Jason Voorhees. And could you survive that battle? It was thematic with, hiking in general. Never Hike Alone is a motto that's been said for years, and it really has to do with people
Yeah.
hiking with their dogs.
Yeah.
And it makes me wish that I had a dog in the movie, but there was no way we
Yeah.
were going to find a dog well trained enough to do that. My brother has like Rottweilers, so they're not really like trail dogs.
Yeah.
So we sort of like took that premise, the idea that you could lead people around, and then the fact that we were on YouTube and people were really kind of, the birth of the influencer, I guess you could say. We thought all of those things just kind of came together in a nice package. It was believable, it was grounded, and then it became about how do we get the best use of this camp and how do we make this film as big as possible. Can we go to crowdfunding and raise enough money to do the things we want to do, because we know friends that can do professional visual effects, Kelsey Burke. We know people who can do stunt coordination, Jess Bennett and Brian Forrest, who who I met doing other projects. And so the only thing is that these are real people that need to go through unions and things like that. So budgets need to be raised, and materials need to be purchased, and pads need to be rented, and vehicles need to be fueled, and people need to stay in hotel rooms, and we need to shoot out in the middle of the nowhere, and we need lights, and we need all these things. So we had to crowdfund for all of it. And so we shot 3/4 of the movie down and dirty with a guerrilla unit of about 5 or 6 people. Chris Thellis, who was a DP, JD Martz, who was a DP, obviously Andrew Leidy as Kyle MacLeod. Jonathan Cabrera was an early contributor there. He was sort of like our swing gaffer, grip. And just for people who don't know what that is, because they always see that in the thing and they're like, who the hell is a best boy? These are the people that set up the lights in the stands. So that's what they set up the lights, they set up the grids, all those different things, and then a swing kind of goes between both lighting and grip. They're not the same thing. Lighting is lighting, it's the lights, it's the electricity. They're making sure we're powered on set, and the grips are the ones who are putting the physical stands up. So when we have cards or setting up white Sykes and things like that, like that's sort of what they do. And somebody who works between can do both. And most of the times on independent film sets, that's what you do have. And then we had Kyle Klein, who was our producer. And then every now and then we'd have like another volunteer tag along and help us out. Like Kristen Asensio, who is an associate producer on our films now, was just a volunteer that I met through Friday the 13th. And, we saw each other at conventions. And he's been a part of every single Never Hike Alone shoot that we've ever had. And he's just a guy who volunteers his time. And so that small group would go up and shoot all the scenes where like Kyle was walking through the things himself and filming himself and not really running into Jason. Like we did film like the attic scene where like we could isolate that, and that was just us doing that. But then we do bigger productions where we're throwing people off second story windows, knocking Jason's mask off and showing a face, doing fight scenes and night scenes and all those different things. Those were nights where we had 25 people on set. And so those were what we crowdfunded for, and that's what helped us. And the crowdfunding helped us a little with the other sets because it was, 5 guys, some gas, some food. We were staying in a cabin all together, all piled in together. Some of us on beds, some of us on couches, some of us on the floor. And it was just a real sort of like camaraderie, like band on tour type atmosphere, and it was a lot of fun. We put together, so the ability to do both of those things like sort of helped us kind of curb the cost. And then through the process of post production, I was playing Friday the 13th, the game, and I mentioned to a couple of people in the chat that I was in, because I was in with a group of friends, and they sort of brought in more friends, that if I had one goal, it would be to release Never Hike Alone on Friday the 13th at the Telluride Horror Show. The Telluride Horror Show is a film festival that I'd heard about, that I wanted to visit, that I wanted to go as like a just as a as a film goer. Like, I thought it was going to be a really cool experience, and they were premiering it Friday the 13th that year, and I just thought it was like, this would be too good if it worked. And while I'm explaining this to somebody in the chat was like, did somebody say Telluride Horror Show? And I said, yeah. I was like, I want to get my film in it. And he's like, well, I work for the Telluride Horror Show. What's your film? And then we dropped into the level, and Jason started chasing us around, and I was pitching the film. And sort of at the end of it, his name was Brad McArgue, and he said, yeah, send it in and we'll take a look. And long story short, we sent it in. It was a part of the festival. We opened up on Friday the 13th in October of 2017. And the rest, they say, is history. It was a cool experience. The film found a fan base, and since then it's just continued to grow. And from that experience, we've been able to branch out and do more and create a series, and create other series and create other films. So it's been a really wild ride. And now we're working towards Never Hike Alone 2. And closing the chapter on this book, sort of, because Never Hike Alone was a film that was made out of necessity. We only had so much budget. We could only do so many things. If you wanted to critique it, you would say, okay, it's a Friday the 13th film, but one, it's found footage. Two, it only stars one guy. Three, the body count is abysmal. And there's a lot of cat and mouse, but for the first third of it, there's not a lot of Jason. And you know those were things that, going into it, we knew were going to be a challenge. So it was our challenge to create atmosphere. It was our challenge to create tension. It was our challenge to show our cinematography skills and go like, this is a film like you've never seen before. When was the last time you saw drone shots that look like this? Like, not just like up there floating around, just kind of like doing whatever, but like they were designed shots that had emotion, that had a beautiful score by Ryan Perez Dapple. It felt like somebody had put together a feature-length production that you would turn on Netflix or go to the theater to see. And that was the goal. And it wasn't to one up anybody. It wasn't to sort of look at the past and be like, see, look how easy it is. It was more of a, I think that we can do this. I believe in us. And even with our small, batch of equipment, that, this is possible. And maybe we can, push our own boundaries. But as our own personal goals, like, we want to make something that looks like a film. We don't want it to look like an independent production. So it was a lot of trial and error. But at the end of the day, like, for all its bumps and bruises, it survived. And we were able to kind of, supplant all the negatives that you would say would easily be able to attribute it to it. And like I said, find a fan base and show them that Never Hike Alone doesn't have to be stuck to a formula, but that the character of Jason and the lore of Camp Crystal Lake can blossom into many other beautiful things.
Yeah, and that's also what I really like about Never Hike Alone, how it's just like a guy hiking alone, like, why? But no, but hiking alone, and then he ends up at Camp Crystal Lake, and he faces, just like Jason, and like this, like you said, in this cat and mouse like kind of ordeal. Like, speaking of, you played Jason in that, didn't you?
Yes, I do. I
Yes.
play Jason along with a stunt performer by the name of Brian Forrest. We share the costume, I would say, about 50% of the time, really. I mean, Brian's in there for a lot of the heavy stunts. If I get injured on set, there's no movie. You know what I mean? So Jess Bennett's really forward about, making sure that I keep my ego in check and say, like, if there's something that Brian can do, let Brian do it, and then let me handle some of the more acting pieces. That said, I do get in there for some of the action stuff because it is a lot of fun. I think, Brian and I share a lot of the kills. Brian has both the kills in Never Hike Alone, but I have the dream sequence. And then in Never Hike in the Snow, I have both kills. And so like it's what's really fun about working with Brian is, we're slipping in and out of the costume back and forth. I mean, we're both in costume on set. We basically just swapped the jacket and the mask. And people can't tell. You know what I mean? Like they think it's me the whole time, which is good. I feel like Pedro Pascal on The Mandalorian. Like he's there for like 3 lines and then it's mostly a stunt guy.
Yeah.
But it's nice that we do share it and that they do coach me into doing things that way. I sort of bring my demeanor and some of the things that I bring to the character because I did work really hard on coming up with Ghost Jason's movement. I work really hard in directing Ghost Jason's movement to make sure that we're both on the same page. I have a few theories that I sort of run through in my head before I get going. And I share those with Brian about like, remember, this is sort of the rules. Like this is how the suit works. It's like, it moves in this direction. It doesn't move in this direction. Like you're moving, and so there's a lot of things like there. We have like sort of checks and balances to get into the right posture. And then from there, we're able to, deliver on what's there. And a lot of it also goes into the camera design work. I should mention that, our current director of photography is Evan Butka, who was a camera operator on the first Never Hike Alone and has worked with us on every other production since, as well as another cinematographer by the name of Ben Meredith, who shot Dylan's New Nightmare. He shot a film called Pathosis for us. He shot on the Judy Project and a lot of other things. So Ben shot the behind the scenes for Never Hike Alone. So it's really a cool collaborative effort between those two. But they do a really good job of making Jason look good. Sometimes me and Brian just have to stand there. And, we just have to be really posed really well because the camera does a lot of the work for us. And in Jason's imposing force, the less he moves, the scarier he is. And when he does go into motion, he's a freight train. It's sort of like the train starts going, it's on the tracks, it's not going to stop moving. It's just going to keep picking up steam. And so we kind of play with that notion when we're out there and that sort of mentality, and that he's got a job to do and he's very efficient at it. And he just wants to get it done as fast as possible. And, it's no nonsense. He's trying not to be emotional about it. And that's sort of where that comes from. It's that, he's a revenant. He's cursed. He has a job to do. This is what he's here to do. This is why he brought back. He wanted to get revenge. His mom wanted a revenge. Well, here's your revenge. Now you get to do this until the end of time. And so it's a cool sort of narrative that we play with Ghost Jason. If you watch, through the films, especially, we start to really kind of bring it to the forefront in our music video Disappear. And then we also touch upon it in Never Hike in the Snow, the prequel to both Never Hike Alone and Never Hike Alone 2, which acts as a prologue to both those films and was an excuse for us to put Jason in a winter setting. So we thought we'd rewind 3 months and sort of tell this story prior to then. But one of the things we're sort of hinting at in these films with Ghost Jason and in the way that we play him in moments when he's not in kill mode is that he's sort of this lost soul who's been stuck on Earth since the early 80s, not quite understanding why he's still here. Like, it's sort of one thing to commit to it back then when he sort of came back and was fresh and was around for a few years. And then, he attacked the Packanack, lodge. He went on the run and, attacked Higgins Hagen. He got put in the morgue, got back up and, went to the Jarvis house and then all these different things. So I tried to take this sort of like, what if this was like a real experience that like someone had? Like they carry the memories along with them, but they also are cursed with this curse that keeps them alive after they die. So they've experienced death multiple times and they keep coming back. And every time they come back, they're a little bit more damaged. They're a little bit more decay. And even they're starting to get surprised, like, how is this even happening? And then like, I don't even have a face anymore. Like, you can see the bones in my fingers and the rib cage in my chest. Like, what is propelling me forward? Because at this point, I feel like I've killed enough people and I just want to go back to bed. And
good night.
But that's sort of like, I think one of the greatest literary tools is sort of the devil's curse. It's like you get what you want, but you also get what you deserve. And so Jason's lesson to learn after all these years is that what has this revenge got him? What has this brought him any peace? Or has he just created more trauma, like the trauma he and his mother faced when he died? And we try to bring a lot of that emotion out in the Never Hike in the Snow story without, making Jason cry or anything. But we just see that like Jason's sort of disappointed in himself. We see it in Disappear. We see that like, here we go again. But like, what did this do? And what have I done? And I will continue doing this because this is the only thing I can do. It's the only reason why I'm here. But eventually this has got to come to an end. And with Never Hike Alone 2, it's sort of like the end of that story. It's sort of the moment where, like, he's been dreading for all these years, is the moment where he does eventually get found and he has to go back out on the hunt and, defend his territory and, eliminate people and go through this harrowing experience of murdering all these people and probably facing some sort of brutal death at the end of it that's gonna hurt because he still feels pain and he's still, cursed to like live through these moments. But, maybe at the end of it, we'll be able to sort of let him go in a way and maybe be okay with just letting him rest and putting him to bed. And from my standpoint, it's a bookend on our series. I think it's a bookend on this chapter of the fan film that, now that the lawsuit is over and we have a TV show coming out, we got possible movies coming down the line from Sean Cunningham, and they're sort of game planning on how they're going to do this stuff. The space for the fan film is going to diminish. People are going to go to the actual, the TV show and the movies now, and that's what most fans have still been waiting. I mean, a lot of people haven't even give fan films a chance still to this day, because of the negative connotation that comes along with, being in a fan film and sort of the past qualities that we've seen of fan films. Not that it's a slight to them, but for the most part, before Never Hike Alone, people were making fan films with home video camcorders that don't have the dynamic focal range that give you that cinematic look. It looks like a home video.
Yeah.
And the audio sounds like it's been recorded from across the room under a blanket with somebody peeing on it. And so I know it's a little over the top, but I was going for the joke. But now that when we showed that, like, you can put these things together in there, we opened up this sort of, window from 2017 to basically now that, a lot of people have come out of the woodwork and, lived their dream. They got to make their own Friday the 13th movie. And it's been a really cool, collaborative effort by a lot of different teams working together and shepherding each other's projects and holding hands and pushing resources around and sharing things. And it's been, a wild ride. And so I think when Never Hike Alone debuts on Friday the 13th in October of 2023, the exact 6-year anniversary of the first Never Hike Alone, the first Friday the 13th in October since 2017, it feels like the ceremonial closing of a chapter on so many different things. And we hope that it brings closure to fans for our series. And we also hope it brings closure for fans of the original Paramount series, because our story is sort of modeled after that original Jason that we saw. And instead of him coming back to Crystal Lake and going through the trials and tribulations of Jason Goes to Hell, that he sort of got lost and went out in the woods and found a way to make himself scarce and become a ghost, and not be found, and work in stealth and learn from his past mistakes and sort of work his way into this solitude only to protect it anytime that he can. The story of Mark Hill and Never Hike in the Snow is very much all about that. It's all about this story of this ghost that lives in the forest and protects its territory, and how how it's able to remain unfound, not only by its own skill, but also by the conflicts that are going on within the town, specifically with Tommy and Rick, because they're not working together, and the people who are tasked with taking care of everyone in town aren't on the same page. Things like the death of Mark and the death of Deputy Mabry are the results of that. And Never Hike Alone 2 is supposed to sort of bridge all these entities together and move forward in one direction, so they can finally face the beast. And, on the flip side, we have Tom Matthews, which is really cool. And he's returning as Tommy Jarvis. And Tommy is this, the wayward son of Crystal Lake. He's gone through all these traumatic experiences. He's found, purpose in a life as an EMT or paramedic, saving people's lives, helping people. He doesn't always get to do it. It's pretty quiet up in Wessex County, but for the most part, it also allows him to keep an eye on things, that if things go a little screwy. So if in part 7, he didn't know that Tina let him out, and Tina does all that stuff.
Yeah.
And he shows up at the what is it? Tina, I don't know. Sue me for not being like the biggest part 7 fan. But anyway, she shows up at Tina Shepard's house. He
Yeah.
shows up at the Shepard's residence, and he sees evidence of Jason, but he can't prove that Jason was there. And then he hears about the stuff that happened with, the SS Lazarus and the kids of Crystal Lake High, but he wasn't there. So becoming a paramedic has allowed him to keep his finger on the pulse. But since then, there hasn't been a lot of activity. And people have gone missing, and he researches it, but he doesn't find anything. He believes that there's a ghost in the forest, but he can't prove it. So Never Hike Alone is sort of like his journey to proving it, and his journey to finding Kyle MacLeod from Never Hike Alone 1, and eventually sort of coming together with him and solving the issue, which is Jason in the forest. Yeah, so on the flip side, you have Tom Matthews, who's playing Tommy Jarvis, who is on the flip side of Ghost Jason, who has sort of been living in Crystal Lake after all these years, catching wind that Jason came back, specifically in part 7 and part 8, becoming an EMT to figure out if he can get a finger on the pulse if Jason was ever to come back, and then sort of living this life after that, never being able to find the monster. I always attribute Tom Matthews or Tommy Jarvis in Never Hike Alone 2 to be a bit of a Don Quixote. He's been chasing windmills for 20 years. He hasn't been able to show any proof that Jason exists. He knows that people are going missing. He knows Jason is responsible, but he can't prove it. And even though Never Hike Alone 2 is a sequel to Never Hike Alone, it does take place partially in the past. In the fact that we see how Tommy comes to find Kyle MacLeod. So we rewind the clock a little bit. We get a little bit of a day in the life with Tommy. Anyone who's watched our Never Hike Alone 2 sneak preview that we released back in Friday the 13th of August, will see the opening scene of the film, which is Tommy having a nightmare about his younger self getting attacked by Jason. And sort of the stress that he still feels about Jason existing in the world and him not being able to find him. The course of events that will take place after that will lead Tommy to Kyle MacLeod. We will pick up at the ambulance scene that was seen in Never Hike Alone 1, and we'll pick up the story from there and kind of tell the rest of it. So it's kind of nice because we get sort of a time to get to know Tommy again, get to kind of see what the type of man he's grown into. He's a loner. Megan's not around. Unfortunately, Jennifer... I forget her last name right now, but Jennifer Cook is not doing films, and I don't think she had any interest in coming back to do Friday the 13th, especially. So we've written in that, they're separated. Megan's not around. Tommy lives on his own. She had no want to live in Camp Crystal Lake anymore. The place where her dad died. There's no good memories there. She just wants to go home. So she does, and she leaves Tommy behind because he feels like he can't leave because he's the protector of Crystal Lake. And then you have Rick Cologne, who feels the same thing. He's the protector of Crystal Lake. Tommy locked him in a jail cell, and all of his friends got killed, and now he's the sheriff. And we're very lucky to have Vinny Guastafara come back and reprise that role. So there's personal stakes between these two, that they have this never-ending grudge that's never going to be solved unless something drastically changes in their relationship. So with all these sort of things kind of working around, we also have Anna Campbell coming back as Dr. Diana Hill, who is in Never Hike in the Snow. She's the mother of Mark Hill, the boy who is unfortunately goes missing in Never Hike in the Snow. She's dealing with the loss of her son. So, I feel like the combination of all these characters, they all have something going on. It's all emotional. It's either this want to protect, or this want to uncover, or this, solve the crime. Like Rick is convinced Tommy is responsible for everything. So he's dead set on proving that, Tommy is the bad guy. And Diana just wants answers for her son who has been missing, and, no one has been able to tell her anything. And everybody's sort of coming together around this catalyst that Kyle MacLeod did something that no one else did in the last 20 years. Went into Camp Crystal Lake, came face to face with Jason Voorhees, and survived. It's a special moment in Friday the 13th kind of lore. And in this world, finally someone got out. And this person has answers. So that's sort of what draws Tommy to Kyle. He knows that Kyle has some answer that Tommy hasn't been able to figure out for 20 years, and he needs him. Unfortunately, this is an injured person who's had a fight with
Yeah.
Jason, so he's owed some time, getting worked on, and he might not be conscious. And Tommy's got to buy time because there's going to be a lot of questions being asked, and there's going to be police sniffing around. Once people start dying and bodies start dropping, like, there's only one person they're going to look at, and it's not Jason, because according to everyone who works in law enforcement there, Jason is a ghost and not real. And so it's sort of like, there's a little bit of like the mayor and Jaws, the mayor of Amity.
Yep.
The
Yep.
beaches are open, everyone's having a
Yep.
great time. There's a little bit of that, and we have our Sheriff Brody, who's Tommy, who is trying to warn everybody that there's a shark in the water. So I really love this story, and the fact that all these characters are coming together. They have a purpose and a reason to be there, and they all have emotional stakes in the game. And it's going to be up to us this spring to follow through and deliver on that project and give fans something that, Never Hike Alone was this really, we were really lucky that we were able to come out with what we did with the resources that we had, and it was really unique. And so, like, we get to exist on the fact that no one expected anything from us. They never expected Tom Matthews to appear in our films. They had no clue we could even do it. Now there are expectations. Now we have expectations to hit a certain quality, and we have internal expectations of the quality that we want to hit. I assure you, we will never hit the quality standard that I set for myself at the beginning of any of these. I always feel like I almost got there, but not quite. And then I have to turn to the fans to see if I actually did. And I've been successful in a lot of areas, and I haven't been successful in some, and I've learned along the way. But I really believe in this project. And for me, it's a wonderful opportunity to live the dream that I've always wanted to do, which was to do a Friday the 13th film the right way, to have to work within the formula's construct, but deliver it in a way that wasn't cheesy, that wasn't arch, that felt natural and felt like they were characters that we could get behind, and it wasn't just cannon fodder to show up and get murdered. But when the cannon fodder does show up, that it does feel natural, and these people are real, and they're not cartoon characters, and that they fit into the modern world of horror films and don't fall back into the tropes that were sort of outdated the minute the clock turned 1990. So
Yeah.
so that's and it's a challenge, on a budget. It's a challenge. We've raised a good amount of money. The crowdfund is still open if people want to back it. The crowdfund for Dylan's New Nightmare is also still open if they want to back that as well, and we can talk about that in a minute.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I've done my Never Hike Alone spiel. But we're really looking forward to telling this story. We start shooting in about 6 weeks. Then we get a whole summer of post-production. We might do some pickups and some bonus scenes over the summer if we hit our $250,000 reach goal. And then we get a premiere in October to do it. And then, we're going to take it on tour. So I'm looking forward to being able to share it with everybody. And I'm looking forward to reaching the end of this journey. It's been a wild ride, and it's going to be nice to celebrate it with a film and getting, fans all of their Blu-rays. And then most likely saying goodbye to the fan film world, for the greener pastures of original content, and hopefully the fans follow us to support us there as well.
Yeah, it's like, I'm kind of sad that I feel like I'm like kind of jumped on the wagon, like kind of at the end of like all things, but I guess like, hey, better late than never, as they always say.
Yeah, it's like tuning into like the last season of a series. You got all 5 seasons, you can just binge it when everyone else had to like slog through it, like had to wait. Like people who watch Never Hike in the Snow, and they were like, it's only 25 minutes and I gotta wait 2 years to see the sequel. I get it, you know what I mean? So you avoided a lot of heartache, and personally I feel it too. So I'm just as excited as anyone to get it out there, because this story's been in my head for a long time, and I've been really excited to tell it. So this is hopefully this is as special as I hope it will be, and we'll be able to be celebrating on Friday the 13th of October.
Friday the 13th, yes, definitely looking forward to like that date. Okay. Now, kind of flipping the script here and going on to Dylan's New Nightmare, and I have to say, okay, I will admit that I haven't seen like Wes Craven's New Nightmare. I know like about it. It's been like one of those movies like on my long like list of films that like, oh, I'll get to it, and then
I suggest you put that right at the top. I'm
Yes.
gonna say that right now. It's one of Wes Craven's best movies. It's definitely one of the strongest entries in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. It exists outside the original franchise, so it is something that's nice and fresh. So if you've seen Dream Warriors
Yes.
one too many
Yes.
times, it's something that's definitely gonna. It's cool. It's a cool thing to think about. In fact, it's a great precursor to Scream. Wes is starting to dabble in the metaverse, and looking outside the box of what films were in the 80s and sort of bringing it into that 90s flair that he did eventually with Scream. But for him, I mean, it really started with Wes Craven's New Nightmare, and um, it's a cool project.
Yeah, it's definitely like I will definitely like now move that to the top of my list because I always thought the premise like sounded
Mhm.
really interesting. Like, whoa, this is really cool.
Yeah, it
Now,
is. Yeah, go ahead.
oh, okay. And now we got Dylan's New Nightmare. So talk to us a little bit about that. Like how much of it was inspired by Wes Craven's New Nightmare? Because I know we got some characters in Dylan's New Nightmare that were obviously in that
Mhm.
film as well.
So, yeah, this is direct sequel. This is kind of like Dylan's New Nightmare is set in the world of Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which means it's meant to be set in our real world, outside of the films. In the films, Nightmare on Elm Street is a film, and the character of Freddy is trying to get out of the film and into the real world because he actually is some other sort of dream demon that has hijacked the Freddy character through Wes Craven as sort of a conduit. And Wes is kind of sort of scared. He's actually a character in his own story of saying that he may have trapped this demon and now the demon is trying to get out. And coming after Heather Langenkamp because it represents the foe that Freddy has been fighting through these films, and there's a lot of thematic stuff there that happens. And in the film, Heather is a mother. She's a wife, and she's still a working actress, and so she's trying to put her life together. And in the middle of it, Freddy, this entity, starts kind of disrupting it. And her young child is played by an actor by the name of Miko Hughes, and so Miko Hughes is Dylan, and that's her son's name. And we have um, Dylan, Miko has agreed to come back and reprise the role of Dylan, and continue that story. And this story was created by a guy by the name of Cecil Laird. He's a filmmaker out of Phoenix, Arizona. He runs a YouTube channel called The Horror Show, which does a ton of variety stuff, a lot of reviews, some skit work, some little shorts, and he's made films in the past. And he approached me, I want to say sometime in 2018, 2019, because he had this idea. He had this idea of following a story of many years after the events of Never Hike Alone. An adult Dylan has to deal with the same issues that his mother did, um, all those years ago. And because Freddie had chosen Dylan in Wes Craven's New Nightmare to be his conduit into the real world, Dylan still acts as that for him, and he's starting to gain strength and wants to use him to come back, and Dylan has to fight back against it. And so I thought that was a brilliant concept. I thought that Miko Hughes, who is very well known for his roles in Pet Cemetery and Kindergarten Cop, and the list goes on and on.
Yeah.
To have the actual actor come back and reprise the role gave it some authenticity. Like it was real. It wasn't somebody else coming back in, but it was the actual Dylan. And Miko was on the convention circuit, and we were able to talk to him. And after we kind of pitched him the idea and put all our heads together, we agreed to do it. So in 2019, we ran an Indiegogo campaign. We raised the money to fund the film. We were gonna shoot it right after Never Hike in the Snow, in spring of 2020, and then the COVID-19
Yeah.
pandemic hit. So it put the production on pause. And even though that was sort of a bummer at the time, it did allow us a lot of time to reflect, think about some of the things about the projects that we wanted to change or improve. It allowed us to go back out and raise even more money to get it to the level that we really wanted it to get, because we were sitting just below what we needed. And when we were able to go back out and talk about it more, it allowed us to go and raise more money and get the funding that we needed to shoot the film. The film was shot last November in Phoenix. We had a great time. Miko came out and was amazing all week. We were able to sign Ron Sloan from the Friday the 13th franchise from Part 5. He came in and played a role. Same thing with Cindy Kanai, who was in Friday the 13th Part 6. And then a few other local actors who came in and filled some roles and did a really great job. It was a very focused production. It wasn't a giant production where we had like a ton of people running around. It was very modest, but we were able to get a lot for what we had. Once we sort of got those images and we were able to actually shoot the film, which was like felt like a long time coming. Earlier, later that year, or actually earlier this year, I think, we put together a game plan to release some of the footage from the film and show people some of the imagery, because we felt like, everyone's been waiting for this project for a long time, and Freddy is not an easy character to nail. So we knew that we had a great design. Nora Hewitt, who is our effects artist on Never Hike in the Snow and Never Hike Alone 2, worked with this sculptor who goes by the name of Mikey Rotz. You'll find him on Instagram. He works for K&B Effects. He's like a master sculptor. Those two work together to create this sculpt of Freddy, which is played by Dave McCrae, who's a voice actor and actor based out of Canada, who actually did a fan film called It's Me, Billy, based on Black Christmas, which is his, it's a big famous Canadian horror film, which is actually one of the ones that kind of sparked the slasher genre. So Dave is playing Dave is playing Freddy. He does an amazing job. One of the reasons why we had to wait was because we had to wait for Canada to release Dave to us. Like, we couldn't get him over the border without having to lock him up for 2 months. So eventually, when those restrictions dropped, we were able to bring everybody out and do that. And so between Dave and Nora's effects and the costuming, we were able to really create this Freddy that we're all super proud of. And it was Cecil's original intention to sort of hold on the Freddy look until we actually released the film. But it was kind of one of those things where it was like, we need to put all our cards on the table. We still need to raise more money to go through post-production. There's still things that we're gonna have to buy down the line they're going to help with the fulfillments. So let's just go for broke and show people what we got. You're not showing them everything. We still have to act. We still have to do it. But I think these images could, benefit us in the long run to say, hey, look, like, we're making something special here, and this looks really good, and everyone did a really good job on this. So if you didn't get a chance to support this film, because I know that there are thousands of Womp Stomp Films, supporters who have supported Never Hike Alone 2 and other projects that we've done and other Nightmare on Elm Street film fans out there, if they're waiting for proof to back this film, this was it. And so we released it. We raised another 10 grand, like, right off the bat. We're still crowdfunding now. We're going to crowdfund all the way through release. Right now, we're looking at teasers and trailers. Well, the teaser's been approved. The trailer's been approved. The full cut has been soft locked. We have some B unit stuff that we're going to shoot pretty soon. We're going to talk about getting the teaser out hopefully next month. If not, probably early April, late March, early April. And then we're looking at release, sometime this summer. We got to give the film the due diligence and editorial, and we don't want to announce a release date until we lock a cut and we know that we can make those dates. And then from there, we're going to work really hard to make sure that there. And of course, I'm going to give Cecil the ability to announce the release date of his own film on the crowdfund. But this one's a special one. For people who don't know about it, and I want to set expectations correctly, this is an episodic. This isn't a fan film where it's going to be an hour and a half. This is going to be about 25, 30 minutes. It's an episode. It's part one of about 3. Again, this was a modest production. There was a lot of effects work that needed to be done, and there was a lot of things that needed to come together to make it happen. I don't think we raised just a little over $30,000, which afforded us about 5 to 6 days on set. And so in order for us to expand on that idea, we need some other things to land in place, and we need to raise more money and kind of get into like bigger sets and things like that. But for now, we kept it focused. We focused on Freddy and Dylan and some other characters that are sort of mixed into this part of the process. And this is sort of part 1 of 3. But it's really cool to see Freddy back in action. I think that fans are really going to be impressed with what Dave has done. I think they're going to be impressed with Cecil's story and how heartfelt it is. And I think they're going to be impressed with like Miko coming back and sort of like dusting off the acting jacket and being in front of the camera again. He put a lot of effort and work into getting prepared for the film. He sounds great. He looks great. And, we felt like we had this version of Dylan that would be this extension of the character and would be Heather's son. That was kind of part of it. And at the heart of it, core, I know one of the most important things for Cecil is that it really does honor the memory of Wes Craven, he's really sensitive to making sure that he's sort of trying to fall in line with something that Wes would have been able to, give a thumbs up to and say, hey, nice thinking, like, good on you, and all that stuff. And too bad he's not here to see it, but we do hope that, like, either people within the Craven estate or people who are just fans of Nightmare on Elm Street, or people who were involved in Nightmare on Elm Street, to see it, that this is a love letter to them. That was the reason why I got involved. I saw it, one, it was a good idea. I saw that it was being done with good intention, and there was a lot of potential to make Nightmare on Elm Street fans happy. So, we're very thankful for the fans for both, Dylan's New Nightmare and the Never Hike Alone projects, for the fact that they do show up on Indiegogo, they do support them, they do, spread the word, and post about them and share articles about them. Like, it's really helpful, because the more people that get to know about it, as we know, the horror community is very communal. We talk, and word of mouth moves faster than any other, moves faster than the speed of light here. And someone saying that they approve something or that they want something usually inspires other people to do the same. So that's what we really encourage, is that, like, we know not everyone can give a lot. We do give perks that, like, are affordable at all levels, but for the most part, if people talk about it, it's going to land in the right ears of somebody who can do a lot of damage for us, who can come in and be an executive producer, or an associate producer or a co-producer, and really pick up the slack for sort of different things that we can do for the film that can make it that much better. Like, being able to be like, oh, how do we afford this and that? And all of a sudden being like, not only can we afford it, we can add to it, and we can give fans more, and we can make the perks better, and we can make the film better. And so it really just comes down to the communal effort of everyone getting together, the filmmakers, the fans, and, all of us, holding hands and putting these projects and making them reality.
And if fans, like, new or old, like, want to support the work that Womp Stomp Films does, like, where can they go?
You want to follow us on social media, so youtube.com/Womp Stomp Films, WOMPSTOMPFILMS. Same goes for Instagram, for Facebook, for Twitter, and TikTok. We post links on our Indiegogo page for Never Hike Alone 2. So if you just type Never Hike Alone 2 into your browser search bar, it should pop up the Indiegogo right away. There are links in all of our videos. There are links to the campaign. Once on the campaign, backers can select from a variety of items, whether just to have their name in the credits of the movie, to get a digital download, to get a physical Blu-ray, t-shirts, posters, pins, all sorts of cool stuff. So I highly encourage people to check it out and find something that's for them. Keep an eye out in the coming month for some cool raffle opportunities. We know that there are some projects or products in our line that are pretty out of reach. There might even be some props from the film that, instead of just making them a high price, we might just take them to the raffle side and say, hey, if you want to be an executive producer and own this really cool prop from the film that gets used on screen in, like, major scenes, then buy this raffle ticket, and that could be you. So there's lots of things coming up that we're really proud of. And the same thing goes for Dylan's New Nightmare. Now that the film is shot, we can sort of break down the props and come up with different things for people. Especially with with Dylan's, it's like, it's done, it's shot, it's in the can, like, it's coming out. So now's the time to get your name in the credits, because that time is going to run out about, maybe, I would say, a month before release. We're going to have to close credits so we can finalize the credit scroll and send it off for publishing. So, the time is now. You may have until about, at least May for now. I'll give everyone May. So it's a good time to maybe squirrel some money aside. As far as Never Hike Alone goes, people will probably have until about September. Probably early September, I'll have to pull credits. We'll probably shut down that campaign for a little bit, and then we'll restart a new campaign, which will be the home video campaign. So that means nobody will get their credits anymore, but there will be other opportunities for fans to do some really, really fun things. We try to make the crowdfunding fun for everybody. We try to offer different items that are VHS tapes, little Ghost Jason dolls, little collectibles and stuff like that. So it's definitely worth checking out. And same for Dylan's, like, lots of cool perks and some new perks coming along the way. So keep an eye out for that.
Awesome. Like, well, I guess that is a good kind of end, like, to our talk about horror and Never Hike Alone, Never Hike Alone 2, and Dylan's New Nightmare. So once again, Vincent, DiSanti. Thank you so very much for taking the time to come and talk about Womp Stomp and your projects.
Well, I thank you for having me, Brandy. I really appreciate you reaching out and giving me a platform to talk to your fans and the people that you know in this community. So it's nice to meet you, and I'm glad we had this chat.
Yeah, yeah, I am too. Again, thank you so much.
Have a good one.
You too.